So Paul, unite.
When is pattern evidence of bias? In court, pattern is evidence of bias all the time. Evidence on which juries and trial judges rely to show discriminatory intent, to show a common scheme, to show bias. When does a pattern prove bias? I wish this were an idle question. It's relevant to the pattern of the Roberts Court when its Republican majority goes off on partisan excursions through the civil law. That is, when all 5 Republican appointees, the Roberts 5 we can call them, go raiding off together and no Democratic appointee joins them. Does this happen often? The Roberts 5 has gone on almost 80 of these partisan excursions since Roberts became chief. That's a lot of times. And there's a feature to these 80 cases. They almost all implicate interests important to the big funders and influencers of the Republican Party. When the Republican justices go off on these 5-justice partisan excursions, there's a big Republican corporate or partisan interest involved 92% of the time. The tiny handful of these cases that don't implicate an interest of the big Republican influencers is so flukishly few that we can set them aside. Let's look at the 73 cases that all implicate a major Republican Party interest. Again, 73 is a lot of cases at the Supreme Court. Is there a pattern to these 73 cases? Oh, yes, there is. Every time a big Republican corporate or partisan interest is involved, the big Republican interest wins. Every time. Let me repeat. In 73 partisan decisions where there's a big Republican interest at stake, the big Republican interest wins. Every damned time. Thus, the mad scramble of big Republican interest groups to protect a Roberts 5 that will reliably give them wins. Really big wins sometimes. I note that when the Roberts 5 saddles up, these so-called conservatives are anything but judicially conservative. They readily overturn precedent, toss out statutes passed by wide bipartisan margins, and decide on broad constitutional issues that they need not reach. Modesty, originalism, stare decisis, all these supposedly conservative judicial principles all have the hoofprints of the Roberts 5 all across their backs, wherever those principles got in the way of those wins for the big Republican interests. The litany of Roberts 5 decisions explains why big Republican interests want Judge Kavanaugh on the court so badly. So badly that Republicans trampled so much Senate precedent to push him through. So let's review the highlights reel. What do big Republican interests want? Well, first they want to win elections. What has the Roberts 5 delivered? Help Republicans gerrymander elections. Veith v. Jubileer 5-4. License to gerrymander. Help Republicans keep minority voters away from the polls. Shelby County 5-4 and Bartlett v. Strickland 5-4 and Abbott v. Perez 5-4, despite the trial judge finding the Texas legislature actually intended to target and suppress minority voters. And the big one, helped corporate front group money flood elections. Big money interests loved unlimited power to buy elections, lobby, and threaten and bully Congress. McCutcheon, 5-4, counting the concurrence, Bullock, 5-4, and the infamous, grotesque 5-4 Citizens United decision, which I believe stands beside Lochner on the court's roll of shame. What else do big influencers want? To get out of courtrooms. Big influencers hate courtrooms because they're lobbying and electioneering and threatening doesn't work, or at least it's not supposed to. In a courtroom, big influencers used to getting their way have to suffer the indignity of equal treatment. So the Roberts 5 protects corporations from group class action lawsuits. Walmart v. Dukes, 5-4. Comcast, 5-4. And this past term, Epic Systems, 5-4. The Roberts 5 helps corporations steer customers and workers away from courtrooms and into mandatory arbitration. Concepcion, Italian Colors, and Rent-A-Center, all Roberts 5. Epic Systems does double duty here because now workers can't even arbitrate their claims as a group. Hindering access to the courthouse for plaintiffs generally. Iqbal, 5-4. Protecting corporations from being taken to court by employees. Harmed through pay discrimination, Ledbetter, 5-4. Age discrimination, Gross, 5-4. Harassment, Vance, 5-4. And retaliation, Nassar, 5-4. Even insulating corporations from liability for international human rights violations. Jessner, 5-4. Corporations aren't in the Constitution. Juries are. Indeed, courtroom juries are the one element of American government designed to protect people against encroachments by private wealth and power. So, of course, the Roberts 5 rules for wealthy, powerful corporations over jury rights every time, with nary a mention of the 7th Amendment. What's another one? Oh yeah, a classic, helping big business bust unions. Harris v. Quinn, 5-4. And Janice v. AFSCME this year, 5-4, overturning a 40-year precedent. Lots of big Republican influencers are polluters who like to pollute for free. So the Roberts 5 delivers partisan decisions that let corporate polluters pollute. To pick a few, Rapanos, weakening wetland protections, 5-4. National Association of Home Builders, weakening protections for endangered species, 5-4. Michigan v. EPA, helping air polluters, 5-4. And in the face of emerging climate havoc, there's the procedurally aberrant 5-4 partisan decision to stop the EPA Clean Power Plan. Pattern. Then come Roberts 5 bonus decisions advancing a far-right social agenda. Gonzalez v. Carhart, upholding restrictive abortion laws. Hobby Lobby, granting corporations religious rights over the health care rights of their employees. NIFLA, letting states deny women truthful information about their reproductive choices. All 5-4, all Republican. Add Heller and McDonald, which reanimated for the gun industry a theory a former Chief Justice once called a fraud. Both decisions 5-4. This year, Trump v. Hawaii, 5-4, rubber stamping the Muslim travel ban. And in case Wall Street was feeling left out, helping insulate investment bankers from fraud claims. Janus Capital, 5-4. Pattern. No wonder the American people feel the game is rigged. Here's how the game works. Big business and partisan groups fund the Federalist Society, which picked Gorsuch and now you. As the White House counsel admitted, they in-sourced the Federalist Society for this selection. Exactly how the nominees were picked, who was in the room where it happened, and who had a vote or a veto, and what was said or promised, that's all a deep, dark secret. Then big business and partisan groups fund the Judicial Crisis Network, which runs dark money political campaigns to influence senators in confirmation votes, as they've done for Gorsuch and now for you. Who pays millions of dollars for that, and what their expectations are, is a deep, dark secret. These groups also fund Republican election campaigns with dark money and keep the identity of big donors a deep, dark secret. And of course, 90% of your documents are to us a deep, dark secret. Then, once the nominee's on the court, the same business front groups with ties to the Koch brothers and other funders of the Republican political machine file friend of the court, or amicus briefs, to signal their wishes to the Roberts Five. Who is really behind those friends is another deep, dark secret. It has gotten so weird that Republican justices now even send hints back to big business interests about how they'd like to help them next. And then big business lawyers rush out to lose cases, just to rush up before the friendly court pronto. That's what happened in the Friedrichs Janus episode. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is the biggest corporate lobby of them all. For big coal, big oil, big tobacco, big pharma, big guns, you name it. And this year, with Justice Gorsuch riding with the Roberts Five, the Chamber won 9 out of 10 cases it weighed in on. The Roberts Five since 2006 has given the Chamber more than 3/4 of their total votes. This year, in all civil cases, they voted for the Chamber's position fully 90% of the time. And in these 5-4 cases I've highlighted, 100%. People are noticing. Veteran court watchers like Jeffrey Toobin, Linda Greenhouse, and Norm Ornstein described the court's service to Republican interests. Toobin wrote that on the Supreme Court, Roberts has served the interests of the contemporary Republican Party. Greenhouse has said the Republican-appointed majority is committed to harnessing the Supreme Court to an ideological agenda. Ornstein described the new reality of today's Supreme Court. It is polarized along partisan lines in a way that parallels other political institutions and the rest of society in a fashion we have never seen. And the American public knows it too. The American public thinks the Supreme Court treats corporations more favorably than individuals compared to vice versa by a 7-to-1 margin. 49% of Americans think corporations get special treatment there. Now let's look at where you fit in. A Republican political operative your whole career who's never tried a case. You made your political bones helping the salacious prosecution of President Clinton and leaking prosecution information to the press. As an operative in the second Bush White House, you cultivated relationships with political insiders like nomination guru Leonard Leo, the Federalist Society architect of your court nominations. On the D.C. Circuit, you gave more than 50 speeches to the Federalist Society. That looks like auditioning. On the D.C. Circuit, you showed your readiness to join the Roberts Five with big political wins for Republican and corporate interests, unleashing special interest money into elections, protecting corporations from liability, helping polluters pollute, striking down common sense gun regulations, keeping injured plaintiffs out of court against corporations, and perhaps most important for the current occupant of the Oval Office, expounding a nearly limitless vision of presidential immunity from the law. Your alignment with right-wing groups who came before you as friends of the court, 91%. When big business trade associations weighed in, 76%. This, to me, is what corporate capture of the courts looks like. There are big expectations for you. The shadowy dark money front group, the Judicial Crisis Network, is spending tens of millions in dark money to push for your confirmation. They clearly have big expectations about how you'll rule on dark money. The NRA has poured millions into your confirmation, promising their members that you'll break the tie. They clearly have big expectations on how you'll vote on guns. White House counsel Don McGahn admitted, there is a coherent plan here, where actually the judicial selection and the deregulatory effort are really the flip side of the same coin. Big polluters clearly have big expectations for you on their deregulatory effort. Finally, you come before us nominated by a president named in open court as directing criminal activity and a subject of ongoing criminal investigation. You displayed expansive views on executive immunity from the law. if you are in that seat, sir, because the White House has big expectations that you will protect the president from the due process of law, that should give every senator pause. Tomorrow we'll hear a lot of confirmation etiquette. It's mostly a sham. You know the game. In the Bush White House, you coached judicial nominees to just tell senators that they have a commitment to follow Supreme Court precedent, that they will adhere to statutory texts, that they have no ideological agenda, end quote. Fairy tales. At his hearing, Justice Roberts infamously said he'd just called balls and strikes, but this pattern, 73-0 of the Roberts 5, qualifies him to have NASCAR-style corporate badges on his robes. Alito said in his hearing what a strong principle stare decisis was, an important limitation on the court. Then, he told the Federalist Society, stare decisis means to leave things decided when it suits our purposes. Gorsuch delivered the key fifth vote in the precedent-busting and union-busting Janus decision. He too had pledged in his hearing to follow the law of judicial precedent, assured us he was not a philosopher king, and promised to give equal concern to every person, poor or rich, mighty or meek. How'd that turn out? Great for the rich and mighty.